Hey guys, Justin here at JHart Modelworks, and it's time for the very last video on the Gordon Murray Automotive T.50 from Tamiya. We've got a little bit left to do on the body, we've got to get our wheels into place, and then just a handful of odds and ends around the car, and we're going to be finished. So let's go ahead and get the camera flipped around and get started. We're starting off again at the front end, and we need to assemble the front under tray. Using some CA glue, we're going to apply the glue here, and then we can insert the fin. There's a small locating tab on the underside of the mounting surface. We're going to drop it into the inner hole and press the part into place. Once we have both of those fins installed, there are two body-colored side pieces that need to get glued in place as well. Don't forget these. They are tiny and easy to miss, and I almost had the entire panel glued together before I realized I didn't have them in yet. There's a small curved groove in the chassis panel. We'll just drop a little glue in and then press the parts in place. Once the panel is fully assembled, we'll add a little glue to the underside of the frame, and like I said earlier, there are these two posts that go through those locating holes on the under tray. We're going to put a little bit of glue on there as well, and then set the under tray in place. The fit is pretty good, but I felt like there was a gap there I wasn't quite happy with, so I chose to pry the seam open a little and drop a touch of CA on the inside of the groove. If you choose to do this, try to keep the CA contained to the inside so that it doesn't ooze out when you press it back together. I also dropped a tiny bit of glue on the back side where the two body-colored parts meet up as well. Next up, we're going to assemble the windshield wiper. We'll run a little bit of glue along the recessed section of the arm, and then we can line up the second part of the arm matching the curve and press it into place. We can then add a tiny drop of glue inside the locating hole on the chassis and drop the post in and move the wiper into place. There are 4 locating holes on the chassis, and we're going to drop a little bit of CA glue into these holes. Then we can set the trunk cover in place. Just like the last video, constantly check your fingers for glue. Now on step 43 with the windshield wiper and the trunk cover, it also says to set the mirrors and the hood ornament in place as well. But I'm going to hold off on that for right now so that I don't break the mirrors off or knock the hood ornament out of position while I'm handling the model during the rest of assembly. There are 2 different sets of decals for the center caps. There's a left side and a right side. The wings should point towards the back of the car, so you need to keep track of which side is which. We're going to drop a little bit of microset into place on the center cap and then position our decal. We can then remove any excess moisture with a cotton bud and start working it into place. Now, I had a little bit of issue with the edges not wanting to go down well, so I hit them with a little bit of heat. Just a second or two on, then back off, and then back on and back off. If your fingers are hot, so is the decal. You do not want to get this so hot that the part melts or warps. I tried working them down a little bit more, and they still just weren't sitting quite like I wanted them to, so we moved on to some UMP Strong Decal Solution. This is their mid-grade solution. This one seems to work the best on these Tamiya decals. Just a little drop of the solution, let it set for a couple of minutes, apply a little bit of heat, and then go back in with a cotton bud and we're going to work the edges down. Now I'm pressing gently and I'm pressing straight down so as not to move or tear the decal by rolling or pressing it sideways, as the decal is now very soft. Now once we got the decals where we wanted them, we let it dry completely, and then I hit it with a coat of Mr. Color GX 112 Gloss Clear, and they look great. So kind of like I said earlier, the only difference in the entire wheel and brake assembly are the decals on those center locks. There is a left and a right hand decal, so it's a good idea to separate them and keep them apart so you don't get them mixed up. Also, these are tiny and they bounce and they roll, so I would suggest when working with the center caps to keep them low to the desk surface so they have less momentum when you drop them, so that unlike me, you don't find yourself on your hands and knees searching for a tiny little center cap. So we're going to add a little bit of CA glue to the inside of the mounting hole in the center of the wheel, and then we can carefully set the center caps in place. Now I found my rubber tipped hose end tweezers were really helpful as they have less slip to them. The tires have a directional tread pattern on them, so check the directions on the instructions and watch which side you put the tires on to make sure you put them on the right way. And the tires slide very snugly over the wheels. There's no need for glue or anything here. The rear brakes are locked in for us, but they have a notch, and that notch lines up with a small pin on the inside of the wheel. Now I decided to line them up at the top, which I think made it a little easier to locate when I pressed the wheels into place. Now once the wheels are all the way in and seated correctly, the brake rotor rotates with the wheel while the caliper stays in place like they would on a real car. It's kind of gimmicky, but it's still kind of cool. For the front wheels, the rotors are not held in place already with the handbrakes, so we need to slot the rotors into position first. Then we can carefully work the wheel into place. The front suspension is more complex and it's less stable than the rear, so if you put too much pressure at once, you can break the suspension components. Take your time and work the wheels into place slowly. Now once you have the wheels in, you're going to find that these wheels are very snug and they don't roll well, which is fine with me. I'm not personally a huge fan of rolling wheels. It's just more risk of the car rolling off of a shelf or a table and falling and getting broken. Now, if really well rolling wheels is really important to you, then before installing your wheels, my advice would be to take a little bit of graphite powder and drop it into the holes, as well as maybe rub it around the posts to help lubricate the wheel a little bit. Now we're going to move on to assembling the engine bay covers, and these are very complex, consisting of several pieces. We're going to start by adding some Tamiya Extra Thin to the mounting tabs on the back of this vent piece. We're also going to run a little bit right along the outside edge. We're also going to apply some Tamiya Extra Thin to the recessed section on the underside of the engine bay panels. I'm not real sure why I chose to use Tamiya Extra Thin for this, but it worked out pretty well. We're just going to press these into place and then check your fingers constantly, especially using Tamiya Extra Thin. We do not want that on these painted body panels. Once that part's had time to set, we're going to come back in with our Tamiya Extra Thin and we're going to apply some along this edge. There are 2 locating pins on here. We want to make sure we get the Tamiya Extra Thin on both of these. I'm also going to add a little bit to this locating point on the underside of that vent. We're then going to take this piece, which is the brace for our glass, and we're going to slot that into place. Again, there are 2 little holes. They sit on the 2 little pins, and everything just kind of presses right into position, and it fits perfectly. We can apply a little more glue to this recessed section here, as well as in this area right here. And then we're going to go ahead and slot this triangular piece into place. Now there is a gap that sits between this black triangular piece and the window bracket. Do not press that down or do not glue those together. Our glass will actually slide into place in that slot. So if you remember during the engine assembly, the exhausts have these casings on them and they have the little vents that stick up like little fins. The little oval pieces glue onto this engine bay panel here. These pieces actually line up with the vents off of the exhaust casings. Now I'm going to dry fit these engine covers in place without the glass installed to show you that the engine covers themselves sit perfectly flush on the body without the glass in place. Now our glass just slots into place like this with no glue. There's another piece of glass for holding the engine bay cover in the open position, so you don't want to glue these in place because those are interchangeable. However, once you install the closed position glass into the engine bay cover and put it in place, you find that neither one of these engine bay covers sit flush on the body anymore. Now this is a problem, but it's easy to fix. The very first thing you want to do is mask off the glass. Now I kind of messed up and ended up going through the tape and scuffing up the glass as well on just one corner, but it's okay because we fixed it with sanding and polishing it out. So I would suggest putting a couple of layers on just to make sure you don't go through it, because we're going to be doing some aggressive sanding. For Christmas, my beloved wife got me a new set of metal files. For the first use, we're going to grab the flat diamond surface file, which is going to allow us to come in and aggressively file away about 0.5 millimeter from the inside surface of the tab that seats the glass down into the chassis. Make sure that we file this plastic away from the inside surface. Now, even though we are using the coarse diamond files here, this still took a couple of minutes to thin down this much plastic. Take your time, be patient, and work it away slowly. You may want to even test fit it several times in between just to make sure that you don't take off too much. Now, when we reseat the glass and drop the panel back into position, it's going to sit exactly how we want it to, nice and flush along that panel line. However, the glass looks a little tacky like this. So to fix it, we're going to sand and polish the glass back out. We're starting with the Sponge Back Display 400 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to sand through every single grit in this collection from 400 all the way up to 2500, alternating directions between each grit. Now I'm not going to make you sit through every single grit of this, just know that there were a lot of grits and it took quite a while to do. Now once we have all the sanding done, we're going to come back in and we're going to polish this glass out using Tamiya's coarse and fine polishes. I'm using the rotary tool just to kind of speed things up a little bit. You can polish this out by hand, and if you are going to use a rotary tool, be careful not to melt or warp the clear parts. So that was Tamiya's coarse polish, and this polish here with the blue cap is Tamiya's fine. I've also switched to a medium grit pad on my rotary tool. Be careful with the rotary tool. Make sure you don't accidentally hit the glass with the hard plastic for the mount or anything like that. And just carefully polish this up, and you should end up with a nice shiny piece of glass when we're finished. Now we're going to go ahead and reseat that glass. And when we set this back into place, it looks perfect. Now, with our engine bay cover sitting nice and flush, we can take this spine piece and we can set it into place. If you remember from an earlier chassis video, there's a small post on the underside of this spine that slides into a hole on the chassis with a poly cap that holds it snug into place. With the body fully assembled, the spine sits perfectly. Okay, we are really close to done now. Just some odds and ends to wrap up, starting with the exhaust tips. We're going to place a little bit of glue on the ends of the exhaust and then just set our tips in place. From the tailpipes, we'll move on to the side mirrors, which actually aren't mirrors at all. They're cameras that display on the small side displays on the dash. Now, to be honest, I'm not real happy with these at all. The The locating nubs on the bottom of the mirrors are pretty much non-existent. The mirror base is too thin to drill and mount a pin in, and there's very little surface area on the bottom of the mirror to support it. All we can do is try to carefully put some glue into the recessed mounting location and try to set the mirror without getting glue everywhere. I'm pretty sure at least one of these is going to get knocked off at some point, especially if I take this to a show, but it is what it is. They seem to be stable for now, but I would really like some more positive and secure locating for these. On the front end, we have a rectangular metal transfer to go under the GMA hood ornament decal. It also provides the chrome part of the logo design, as the decal is transparent in those areas. We need to get that placed exactly on the raised rectangular surface on the front end. We'll get that burnished down with a toothpick, and then we'll leave it to sit for about 5 minutes before we lift the clear transfer layer. I find that if you let the metal transfer sit for a little while, it gives the adhesive some more time to gain a better hold, and then it doesn't come up when you lift off the clear layer. We can then apply a little microset and carefully set the GMA logo decal in place over the metal transfer. Then we can use a cotton bud to remove the excess moisture and then fiddle around with it to get it as close as we can to perfectly in place. We have a couple of more decals to place, starting with our registration sticker and our toll tag. Now, I kind of feel like you've seen me do a lot of decals, so we're going to go ahead and speed this footage up to about double speed. And now onto our license plate. This sheet of aluminum came from some soda can. Go for soda can rather than energy drink cans, as the energy drink cans seem to be a bit thinner and don't hold their shape as well. We'll follow the standard decal process to set our license plate decal in place on the aluminum. Once the decal has dried and set, we'll use some Xuron photo etch shears to cut out one of the license plates, and then we'll trim around it right up to the edge. And make sure to notch the corners of the plate. I like to add 0.03 inch Protect bolt heads to my license plates, and it's easier to see them against a white sheet of paper, so I do this over a white sheet of paper. We'll place a tiny drop of CA glue on the license plate, and then using a saliva moistened toothpick, we can pick up the bolt head and place it in place on the plate. I did say saliva moistened. For some reason, it has just enough surface tension to pick up the bolt head and hold it on the toothpick until you set it in place, and then it just lets go. Nothing else really holds like that. I'm going to repeat this process to do 4 bolts on the license plate. With the plate done, we'll add a little CA glue to the license plate plenum, and then we can set it into position, making sure we get it as straight as possible. And that is a wrap for this build. I absolutely love how this came out, and I really love this kit. It made me want to go get a hold of the Senna kit to see how that one is, as I believe it has a similar engineering style. We went with the Splash Paints Candy Orange over Zero Paint's Extra Fine Silver Candy Base. I love how the orange turned out. I honestly think the Candy Orange has a lot more depth than the darker orange pearls a lot of guys have been using. The highlights are incredibly bright, the shadows are deeper, and when the light catches it, it just catches fire. The forged carbon fiber we did using a collection of Tamiya acrylics over a black base, and then we slightly overcoated it with a thin layer of semi-gloss black to tone it back down. While I did do a tutorial on this during the engine video, I may either cut that footage out and make a small, standalone video, or I may just do another how-to video on it to make it easier to find. All the details on the interior came out great, including using the microspheres to make the Alcantara textured dash. And the engine came out beautiful as well, even though, honestly, you can barely see it once it's in the car, which is a real shame. The only two real issues with this kit are the engine bay covers not sitting right once the glass is installed, which we easily fixed in this video by filing the locating tabs down to make them thinner, and that panel gap on the front end between the doors and the front cowl. That one we can't really fix now, as the body panels were all painted before I discovered the issue. The best way I've seen to fix this is to add a 1mm strip of styrene to either the back end of the front cowl or the front end of the upper door panels with some Tamiya Extra Thin before you paint the body panels. Then after that has cured up, you want to trim and sand all the edges and get it sanded to make sure that everything fits perfect. Then you can go back in, primer and paint, and it should be perfect. That is all for this video. I'm going to go ahead and start getting to work on the unboxing for the next project. Thank you for coming and hanging out and building with me. I always appreciate when you guys come and watch the videos, comment in the comment sections, and interact with me. I really do enjoy the interaction. Like I said, that is all for now, and I'm going to catch you on the next one.